right. Welcome, everyone. I am so excited because right now I get to introduce you to three of not only my writing friends, but also I get to geek out because these are like some of my favorite romantic suspense authors. And it's so much fun to have Lynette Eason and Lynn Blackburn and Lisa Harris with us today. So thank you all for making time to come and join us this afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cara.
Thank you.
So I have to know, we're going to start, and this is going to be kind of really quick popcorny type of things, but feel free to drop comments in if you've got questions or things you want to share, like favorite books from these authors, what you wish they would write, all those kinds of things. But I think one of the questions that most readers have for authors as they're getting started is, what comes first for you, the plot or the characters? And Lynn, we'll start with you.
Okay, characters. It's always the characters. I have a general idea of who they are and where they are, and I have to come up with their names, and I start figuring out family dynamics and things like that. And usually from there I have an idea of where the story is going to go, but plotting is not my strong suit. I do much better with developing the characters and fleshing out those relationships. So for me, it's characters.
How about you, Lisa?
I think I would have to say it's probably split 50-50. Sometimes I'll have a character that's been rumbling around in my mind for a very long time. But then there's also, I think like with my U.S. Marshals, actually that just came out, it was kind of I wanted to do a U.S. Marshal. And so it kind of, the whole series setup came to me first, and then I started plugging in the characters. So it just, I don't know, I guess it just depends on what is going on in my head at the moment and what ideas come. But yeah, I think 50-50 probably.
And how about you, Lynette?
Okay, I need to clarify something here. Lynn and I have a running joke. So whatever she says is probably going to be what I say, because we have a hashtag same person joke. Yeah, so minor character. I mean, it's really kind of scary. But minor characters, I have to know. I have to know who I'm writing about before I can actually write about them. So I kind of interview my characters before I get started. But on the flip side, I also do have an idea of the story, because I kind of need to know what kind of characters I'm going to put into the story. So
yeah, well, I'm in idea generation right now. I've got 2 novellas and a novel I have to write this summer. And it's so fun how the ideas come from different places, but sometimes you really do have to have the idea, the plot, that what if hook before you can figure out what the right characters are. And sometimes it's the character that drops into your mind and you're like, I'm going to write a story about that. So I think it's always fun. So you all have fantastic books. Like I just finished Lisa's last week. Lynette's, I endorsed yours. Lynn's, I've endorsed yours. So how did you get the idea for your most current novel? So first you have to tell us what the name of your most current novel is, and then where that idea came from. So Lisa, we'll start with you.
Okay, my most recent novel was with Revell, The Catch. And it was actually book 3 in my U.S. Marshal series. And so obviously the idea had to come from, it had to relate to the series because I've got 2 main characters that go throughout the whole series. So the overarching plot line was already there, but then it was coming up with a standalone case for that book. And so that was kind of fun because I'd already done kind of The Fugitive, and I needed to cut with book 1, and I needed to come up with something different. So it was a matter of just kind of searching, seeing what the U.S. Marshals did. And this actually has somewhat to do with witness protection, which it just was a lot of fun research. Yeah.
I loved how you wove those 2 together. It was so much fun. And Barbara agrees with me. It was a great book. But Lynn, what was your most recent, and where'd that idea come from?
So my most recent is also with Revell. From Malicious Intent is the 2nd book in the Defend and Protect series. And that idea, so that Unknown Threat is book 1, and Malicious Intent is, I always have a cast of characters that the hero and the heroine change from one book to the next, but they're usually all in there. So you get to know everybody all the way through. And this one, the idea came from a couple of places. I have a PhD bioengineering. She's she creates prosthetics, and that concept came from when I was in school. I went to Clemson, go Tigers. I have an engineering degree, and I worked in our bioengineering department. And so I thought it would be fun to have a bioengineer as the heroine. And then there's a malware, ransomware issue in this story that I actually got the idea and had written the book before some of the big stuff that hit the news with the pipeline about a year or so ago. That was already done and written. And that actually came because, when you're doing research, part of my research, because this series is about the Secret Service. So part of my research is that the Secret Service has a podcast called Standing Post, and you can listen to Secret Service agents talk about cases and different roles in the Secret Service. And they had an FBI agent and a Secret Service agent talking about a big ransomware case. And I was right in that idea generation stage when I heard that. I was like, that's it. That's what that aspect of the story will be about.
Podcast for the win. And I love that it had both the FBI and the Secret Service. And then you've got the Marshals, and then you've got Lynette's books. And yours is totally different. So tell us about this one.
So Lifelight is book 1 in the series. I'm actually writing book 4 now. But so I have to think back. What's this book about? I'm just kidding.
I understand.
So
Penny.
Okay, so it is book 1. Yeah. The idea came from, I honestly don't know. I do a lot of brainstorming, and so I get ideas, like when I get ideas from other people that are pinging stuff off me, I'm like, oh, I like that. Oh, I like that. And then I kind of put it all together and make a series out of it. But I realized I really like the idea of a medical helicopter crew. And so I was like, what's that all about? So I went and did my research and found out, who is on the chopper, what they do, that kind of thing. And then as I'm writing this book, I find out that my cousin's husband, who I really don't talk to them that much because they live in Texas, but he is a flight nurse. And I was like, oh, well, that's cool. So fill me in. And so he gave me a bunch of details about, the different things that I should put in the story and trying to make it sound like I knew what I was talking about. So, but yeah, so that's kind of where my ideas come from, just like wherever.
That's awesome. And what I loved about Lifelight is my dad actually was a medevac pilot in the military for forever. And so served in 2 wars, all that good stuff. And so I was like, oh, I felt like I was in the cockpit kind of imagining what he would have done. So it was
obviously you did well, Lynette.
yeah, it was really cool. So here's a really quick question as well. Would you and your main character actually get along?
Oh yeah.
What do you think, Lynn?
I would. Yes, we would get along great. The whole engineering thing would be fun, and of course, my hero Gil has his own hashtag Team Gil, because everybody loves Gil. So feel sure we'd get along great.
Yeah. Lisa, how about you?
Yeah, I agree, except all of my heroines, especially, they're all real kind of adrenaline junkies, and that is not me. So they might be out there doing all that stuff that I, roller coaster rides or whatever, chasing down the bad guys, obviously. And I'm happy to watch, but we get along.
Yeah, you'd be holding the bags for everybody.
Exactly.
So when they got off the zip line or the roller coaster, you'd be like, here's your stuff.
Yeah.
Photos.
Exactly.
That's awesome. Lynette, how about you and Penny?
No, we're not. I actually cannot fly because of a vestibular issue. It causes vertigo, which is really depressing, but we won't go there. So I live vicariously through my characters. I love the research. I love all of the things that go into it. But yeah, no, I'm happy to sit on the sidelines and watch.
Yeah. I always think in theory, all those things sound amazing. Like I always tell my students, I'm like, I would love to go skydiving, yet I know you would have to peel my fingers off the fuselage and kick me out. And then I'd be like, this is amazing. I can't believe I'm doing this. So I think I'm probably somewhere there in the middle. So if you could spend a day with another popular author, who would it be? Other than, of course, the amazing women here right now.
Everyone's hard.
It's a hard one.
All right, Lynn, I'm going to put you on the spot. Who would you hang out with?
Put me on the spot.
Because it can't be Lynette, because y'all are already the same person.
Wait, yeah, I was about to say Lynette doesn't count because she's 5 minutes away.
They have to be alive.
I was going to say, do they have to be alive?
Nope, don't have to be alive.
They don't? Oh, well then I am 100% hanging out with the Inklings. I'm with Tolkien and C.S. Lewis.
Yeah.
I would love to be a fly on the wall. That one is, if they don't have to be alive, that's definitely who I would want to hang out with.
Yeah, that would be so cool. How about you, Lisa?
That is a great choice. When I was looking at the questions earlier, the thing that popped into my mind was Agatha Christie. I actually read a fictional book about those. There was like 2 weeks when she disappeared. Anyway, it was kind of, it was really good. And it just kind of, I just would love to just hear, I mean, she's got to have a lot of stories, she's got just how her mind worked. And I just would be fascinated just to sit and listen to her.
That would be incredible. How about you, Lynette?
That's a tough one.
It is.
I know, because there's so many. So I think I would have to pick Dee Henderson, because she mentored me from afar for so long. I have never met her in person. We always communicate through email and text and stuff like that. So I would have to pick her. And can I add one?
Yeah, absolutely.
I want to plot like Jeffrey Deaver. Like I want, that he just is a master plotter, and I would love to pick his brain on plotting.
That would be amazing. And this is the book I'm listening to right now. I don't know if you can see it. It's the Narnia.
Yes, the Narnian.
And as we're all geeking out on C.S. Lewis, and several of those participating are saying, "Oh, I'd love to meet him." I'm like, it's been such a good book because it's all about how he became the writer he was. So I've really been having so
I'll
much
have to check that out.
Yeah. And a lot of people loving Dee Henderson. There are some of her books that I have read so many times, like Danger in the Shadows and Negotiator.
She was definitely my inspiration of a writer who didn't have romance with everybody just hating each other to the last page, which I didn't like. And so she was such an influence, with my writing. It's like, they can actually like each other through the book and, deal with different things that keep them apart. But I liked that. Yeah.
Well, and Deb Hackett says that if we all come to England, she'll take us to the pub that the Inklings met at, which I think girls trip will brainstorm from Oxford. I think that sounds like a business.
I think it sounds great.
Wouldn't that be fun? So one of the reader questions that we just got is, why romantic suspense? Out of all the different genres you could be writing, why did you choose romantic suspense? I think that's a fantastic question. So Lisa, we'll start with you this time.
Well, I think for me, definitely because that's what I started out reading. Not necessarily romantic suspense, but like Gothic novels and Nancy Drew and all those things. So when I started writing at the very beginning, I wrote for Heart Song. But I could not just write a straight romance book, and I would always have the suspense, and really it just never really worked. But once I found my niche in writing romantic suspense, and again with like Dee Henderson, because I've read I read all those books, that's just what I like to read. And I loved the lots of suspense, but you got to have the romance too, but I don't want just romance. So it just was the perfect match for me.
Yeah, I agree. How about you, Lynn? What led you to be like, romantic suspense is my sweet spot?
Very similar to Lisa. I was reading Tom Clancy novels when I was 11.
Yes.
I don't necessarily recommend that, but I was. And so I loved like political thrillers and the spy concept. I really wanted to be a spy. I would have made a horrible spy, but I really wanted to be a spy. So that aspect of things, but I in the romantic suspense genre, I am team romance. I love the romance. And so I tried to write just, contemporary romance. And by chapter 3, somebody inevitably wound up being an undercover agent, or there was an explosion. And I realized I should not fight it. I needed to have both. I needed the romance, and I needed the suspense and the action and the danger. And so, and like Lisa said too, it's my favorite thing to read. That was it. I've tried writing other things, it doesn't work. So
I grew up on Clancy as well, but I did it so that I'd have something to talk about with my dad, because he was a big Tom Clancy fan. And so read all of those. And I'll never forget with Hunt for Red October, I was like, good Lord, I could drive a submarine.
Yes.
You know?
I'm like, I don't need to know how to do this, but I do now. Yes.
I could do it. I could totally do it. And so for me, that's always been a great caution, because like, I love Jack Ryan as a character. Absolutely love Jack Ryan and that whole world and everything. But at the same time, we have to find that balance of give people enough detail so you feel like you're there, without giving so much detail that you're like, I could literally go climb in a submarine and I could steer the thing. And I don't need that much detail. So Lynette,
I don't either.
Yeah, Lynette, why do you write romantic suspense?
Well, I would say it was kind of a natural progression for me from what I was reading as a kid. Like, I was always drawn to the mysteries, like Nancy Drew and the Hardy Boys, and let's see, Agatha Christie, even, Alfred Hitchcock, all those kind of authors. But I also like the romance stories, the romance side of things, which is really strange because I'm not that big of a romantic. My husband's way more romantic than I am, poor guy. But I liked the suspense stories that had a thread of romance, and I did not like the romance stories that did not have a dead body in them. So I mean, it just kind of was a natural thing for me to, I guess, if I was going to start write something like that. Yeah.
I think it's so fun how all of us were like, straight romance? That's so boring. There's got to be something more happening. And for me, it might be writing the World War II thread, or it's writing the suspense, but it's like, you need romance, but that's not enough. Another reader question that I think is really kind of fun is there any research you've done or something where you were writing and it just made you like stop and your eyebrows raise and you're like, oh, I didn't know that. Where'd that come from? Like for me, the one I always say is I'll never forget writing in Panera. I was like 40 pages from the end of Stars in the Night and go on the phone with Robin Carroll going, I don't know who killed all these people. And so I'm having this conversation in a Panera about murder. Or for Flight Risk, I'm sitting at a Chipotle on campus talking to two professors about, well, how would we bring down a plane? And both times I'm like, where are the people calling the cops on me? Because you shouldn't have these kinds of conversations in public.
I think we've all probably had that.
Yeah.
I know I started doing some research on the dark web because I don't even know what I wanted to do, but there was something I wanted to write about. And I just started seeing stuff. I was like, nope, I'm not going there. So there is some, I do have limits to, what I want to research, what I want to look at, what I want to read. So I drew the line there. Yeah.
How about you, Lynn?
Well, it's funny. I was actually going to say the dark web. I have a character. She's the heroine of the second book in my first series, Into Deep, Sabrina Fleming. And she is a cybersecurity and computer forensics professor and an expert that law enforcement agencies, contact and things like that. And so I actually talked to a guy who does that kind of thing in real life. And he was phenomenal as a resource, but he sent me all this information about the dark web. And I was just like, I did not know that was a thing. And I didn't need to know that was a thing. And just, there's just a whole, there's a whole world out there. And then the other really was, I also did, that same book has some research on human trafficking that was specific to where I live. That was very disturbing and eye-opening as well. Just the prevalence of human trafficking, specifically labor trafficking, because when we think about human trafficking, we tend to think sex trafficking, but labor trafficking is a very real problem. And in fact, that's what I chose to focus on in that book. So sometimes the research is just, I'm like Lisa, there's a line, I can only go so far. I did have nightmares when I was researching Into Deep, and I didn't go as deep as I could have, but I have to be really careful about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the dark web. I was just reading an article, I think in Wired, about, some of the investigations and bringing down child pornography rings and stuff. And I'm like, there's a book there. I don't think I can write it because I still have young kids. And so I'm like, can't go there. So Lynette, how about you? Anything that made you go, ooh?
Some of the same stuff. I mean, since we kind of write similar stuff, we kind of do similar research, I think. And one of my things is I have 2 FBI agent buddies who read every single one of my stories and give me feedback. And so when I am writing about FBI stuff or have an FBI character, I do my research first, and then I write the scene and I say, can you give me feedback? How do I fix this? How do I make it sound like I know what I'm talking about? And I tend to learn way more than I ever wanted to. And I have one of my FBI buddies, she is a teacher at heart. And so, and she's so grateful that you want to get it right. And so she will send me articles and she will send me case studies and all this kind of stuff. And I just, like the others say, I have a line that I kind of don't want to cross with what I put in my head and what I give to the reader. So yeah, just like the depth of mental illness, I guess that's out there, and the lack of resources available, and the need for someone to step in and say, we're going to help these people and do something about it. So that's been a real eye-opener to me. I didn't grow up around a lot of mental illness, and if I did, I didn't recognize that I was kind of sheltered. And so doing all this research, it's really become apparent that mental illness is like a major thing in our country and worldwide. So anyway, that it kind of opened my eyes to that. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think that, for us, we have to have our eyes open so we can then help readers.
Right, absolutely.
So that's why
I think all of us are wanting to shine the light in the darkness without, and without just putting all the horrible details on the page, but just enough. Right. But then the whole point is there's, we live in a redeemed world. There's a light, and that's what we want to shine. But you got to also, we want a hint of that, but not,
absolutely.
And I think that's such a great point, Lisa. That's why we're writing Christian fiction and not just general market fiction, because there's nothing for me as a reader. And I've already read like 60 books this year. So, I mean, I read all the time, but there are some authors I love that some of their books just end with such a lack of hope. Yeah. And I'm like, oh,
you need that hope.
You end it and you're like, you feel heavy. And I'm like, the world is the way it is, but I always want it to end with a breath of hope. A wink of light that we can push it back no matter how bad things are. And so that can be one of the gifts, but also one of the tricks when we're writing these books that are dealing with the real world. And I don't ever want to pretend the world's not what it is. So finding that balance can be really tricky. So another reader question is, did you know that you always wanted to be a writer, or how did you decide that you were going to be a writer? So for me, I remember, and I think we're all about the same age, when I was growing up, there was Jeanette Oak, Gilbert Morris, Jane Pert, and Madeline L'Engle. And that was about it. And so I'm like, I can write a book because they're not writing fast enough. Talk about the hubris of a 13-year-old. Yep. How about for y'all?
No, I did not want to be a writer. I wasn't even thinking about writing. I was a reader. I was just voraciously reading. I read so much that when I got my learner's permit from the DMV, I got in the car. I was so excited I was going to get to drive. And I looked at my mom and I said, how do we get home? Because I never went anywhere without a book. And so I literally didn't even know how to get around my own very small town. And so my mom actually banned me from reading in the car until I learned my way around town. But I was good at writing. I always did really well as far as writing, which is unusual for an engineer. And it was something I was capable of, but I didn't have any driving desire to do it. And I was in my 30s and actually read an author interview where she made the comment that she had been telling herself stories in her car or something. And I went, oh my word, because I have had vivid, detailed stories in my head for as long as I can remember. And why it never occurred to me that that's what writers do, that they have stories in their head and they write them down. Like it didn't click until I was in my 30s. And then at that point, it was like, well, I've read thousands of books. How hard could it possibly be? I made it about 2 paragraphs before I realized I didn't even know how to format dialogue or anything. I had to pull a book off the shelf and look at it and figure it out. So it turned out to be, harder than I thought. But yeah, so I was very definitely a reader long before I was a writer.
That's awesome. Lisa?
Well, I always wanted to be a writer, actually. And it's funny because I always thought that writers were just people that put the stories that they had in their head. So in other words, everybody has stories in their head and writers just put them down. But my mother-in-law one day, she's like, no, the only thing I have in my head is like a grocery list. And I was like, what? But I was always dictating stories even before I could write to my mom. And I have little handwritten pages like from junior high. And it wasn't until I was in my 20s that I actually said, okay, because nobody really encouraged me and it seemed like a frivolous thing to write fiction for some reason. I don't know why I thought that, and then I decided to write my first book when my oldest son, we adopted him and I was a stay-at-home mom and I didn't have a car. So I was just there so I wrote a book and then I've just never stopped.
That's awesome. How about you, Lynette?
Can't say that I've always wanted to be a writer. Like that thought really didn't gel. I've always been good at writing though, as far as school related stuff. Like I always made A's on papers. I preferred essays to multiple choice, that kind of stuff. And so, but like Lisa, I've always had stories in my head. Like that's when I was a kid, I can remember laying there trying to go to sleep and I would just make up stories. I had, I was like, I had a younger brother, but I wanted like 5 or 6 siblings. So I created my own siblings and the stories that went with them. And that's how I went to sleep at night. And so, and then in 8th grade, I remember trying to write a book. I just thought, oh, that would be fun. I'm going to try and write a book. It was too hard. I gave up. And so it wasn't until I was married with a child that I was like, and I was a stay-at-home mom. I didn't have anything to, most of my friends were working full-time jobs and that kind of stuff. And I was like, I didn't have anything to do during the day. And my husband traveled for his job, so he was never there. So I was like, I'll just talk to the voices in my head then. And so it was kind of therapy because I was lonely and, I was like, okay, so I visited with my characters every day and I eventually pounded out the story that was horrible and will never see the light of day, but it was a start. And just kind of took off from there. Somebody said you ought to try to get that published. I think I never had the desire to get it published, and somebody said, yeah, try to get it published, and I did and got completely rejected. And I was like, that made me mad, and I was determined, I'm going to figure this publishing thing out. Like, what is it they want? And all I wanted to do was have one book published, and then I was done. I would move on. And well, I got stuck.
I love that you got mad.
I got the bug.
Yeah. Okay, so now we're going to enter what I'm going to call like lightning round because we're already at 30 minutes, but I think this will be fun. So first up, and this is off our list. How many books? So I'm at 36 right now. Lynn?
8.
Lisa?
About 50.
Oh my gosh. Lynette? 100?
60 something.
It's more.
See, I have so much work to do. I don't know about you, Lynn, but I feel like I have so much work to do.
I'm so far behind. Yeah. And I'm so slow. I'm like one a year,
Lisa,
people.
I started with Heart Song, so those are shorter books. So I mean that helps.
I have 2 of mine are Untitled Suspense. They're shorter too, but
we got lots of time.
Okay. So what's your favorite writing, snack, or drink? Go, Lisa.
Matcha tea. I know that's weird.
No, Lynn.
Peanut butter M&Ms.
Lynette.
Coke and M&Ms.
All right. I would say probably coffee or cheese and crackers. I'm very boring. How do you celebrate when you finish writing a book? And I'd be like, celebrate? You mean you don't just go to the next one?
No, just go to the next one.
I don't do a good job of celebrating either, but this last time I did schedule, it just worked out that the timing was such that we were traveling and I had a spa day. And now I think
You should do that every time.
I might be thinking I should do that more often because that was amazing. It was fabulous.
How about you, Lynette? How do you celebrate?
I get on my knees and thank Jesus I did it again. And then I move on.
Yeah. So when you're on deadline, how many hours a day do you write? So my sweet spot is 2 hours, and that's one chapter, 2,000 words. Lynn?
When I'm on deadline, it might be 3 or 4 hours. It varies, but pretty much every spare moment when I'm on deadline.
Exactly. Lisa?
Yeah, I always have a lot of interruptions because I've got other things, but probably at least 3 or 4 hours.
And Lynette, how often do you write, or how much?
It varies. It can be 4 hours. It can be 12 hours.
Yeah, it depends on how close you are to the deadline, right? How many words are left? Okay, so here's the last one. Does writing energize or exhaust you? Lisa?
Both, actually. I mean, it makes me so excited, and then I'm dead.
Yeah. How about you, Lynn?
Absolutely. It's sometimes when it's fun, like when the words are flowing, in that moment, it feels great. Or when you have that moment where something ties together that you didn't see coming. But then when it's done, it is I'm exhausted. And I have, because mental work is still work and it does physically exhaust the body, even though you're not running around. And so it's definitely both.
How about you, Lynette? Energize or exhaust?
Both. It depends on all the factors involved.
Yeah. Well, and like for me, it's the getting started is exhausting. And then once I'm in the flow until about the midpoint, and then at the midpoint, I got to kill someone because I'm just like, I don't know where this thing's going. It's a piece of crap. And then at the end, it's like this race. And then you're just like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
And so
it is
and I'm very much at the exhausted getting started stage where I told my husband, I'm like, okay, I'm going to be grouchy for the next week. I'm going to try and minimize it, but I'm getting started. And so it's work.
My husband's like, now, Lisa, you always go through this. So just expect this, whatever point I'm at, my frustrated point or my happy point. So he's like, stop being frustrated because this happens every time. And he'll just tell me exactly how I'm going to feel over the next, month or whatever. And I'm like, okay, I guess you're right.
You think we would learn. We would learn. Okay, last question. And this one's kind of fun. Well, I think they're all fun. If you could be a character in one of your favorite books, who would you be? It's like, I would be Anne of Green Gables. Growing up, I was always Anne, and my friend was Diana.
Oh, so it doesn't have to be my books, good, because they're too scary.
It could be. I mean, if you want to be Penny and fly the helicopter, go for it.
So
I thought this would be fun. And y'all are like,
this is
I don't know. I never really thought about that, I guess.
I
missed that question.
I was thinking in my own books. And so, but in any book, well, I mean, there's always Nancy Drew, right? I mean, let's face it, you go around.
I think that's a great,
as a teenager, you just, and that was actually one of those stories that I had in my head at night when I was trying to go to sleep. I didn't make up siblings. I made up a small group of teenagers who had been hired by the CIA. Anyway, it's a whole thing. So it's completely unrealistic, but it worked for me. I spoke multiple languages, and because of course I was the heroine. So, but I think maybe Nancy Drew, and then because the truth is, with most characters, we're not nice to them.
No.
So I don't. Some of my favorite characters, I'm also like, I don't know that I would necessarily.
I don't want to go through that.
I don't want to go through that. This Nancy Drew, I mean, her life is, she stopped crying. It was all good. So Nancy Drew.
No real danger there.
I would love Anne of Green Gables as well. I mean, let's face it, Anne is amazing. So
Allison Pittman and I were having an argument last night about Cap Garland versus Gilbert Blythe. And I'm like, okay, Cap Garland is good. The long winter and going to go with Almanzo to get food for everyone. That's good. But there's still Gilbert.
There's still Gilbert. Hence Team Gil, who is named after Gilbert Blythe.
Oh, that's great.
Gil
is
so fun. Yes, no, Gil, Team Gil all the way.
Yeah. Allison would disagree. She's like, Team Cat. And I was like, I like
No.
you. No.
No, she's wrong. No.
So Lynette, do you have anyone that you would like to be if you were a character?
I was sitting here thinking while you were talking. Probably, I think I'll be never mind. Temperance Brennan, maybe. I don't know. I like Bones, and I really like her character, and she intrigues me. She's not the most congenial person, but
Yes.
she's smart, and she does a cool job, and a good-looking man. So I got a good-looking man. I don't need another one.
Yeah, exactly. And Vicky's like, I would be Melanie from Gone with the Wind. I love Gone with the Wind, but there's Scarlett. I mean, there is something to Scarlett. There's a reason we love to hate her.
Well, there's that.
But I think most people are agreeing with us. Team Gil, all the way.
All the way.
I'll go with that one.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me. This was
Thank
so
you.
fun, and just learning more about your books and your writing. And now everyone's had a chance to meet you and get to know why you and your books are so awesome. So thanks so much, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Cara.
Thank you so much, Cara.
Bye, y'all.